Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you, Stephen and Olivia and Cloudingo for having me. I'm excited to be here. As you can see, I'm broadcasting live from Oz with my green background. And by way of introduction, I am a Salesforce consultant, developer, architect. I have 26 different Salesforce certifications, 8 years in the Salesforce ecosystem, 20 years of direct sales and sales management experience, and hundreds of customer implementations. And I'm particularly excited because what motivates me is seeing the delight in customers' eyes when all of a sudden their jobs become easier and their customers become happier. And as we'll talk about plenty today, data is the unifying thread throughout all of that. So I'm very excited for this lively discussion that's about to happen.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm Steve Harding from Cloudingo. I'm sure some of you out there have met me either at Dreamforce or gotten emails, or we've had phone conversations. So welcome. For those of you who I haven't actually spoken to directly yet, we're glad to have you here. This webinar today is about Salesforce data management, and we just want to talk about some best practices and some different approaches and things that you should be thinking about with respect to your Salesforce data management. And this is part of a kind of sometimes series we do here at Cloudingo, webinars that are designed to give you some things to think about, to help develop your own knowledge and understanding and skills. And so we're really excited to have Kevin Ascher with us today. Kevin has been a partner at Cloudingo for a while, and he's been a great partner, really impressed with him and his knowledge and his background. And so I think he's going to have some really interesting and useful insights for you. So with that said, let's talk just a little bit about what the agenda is today. And so we're going to cover lots of different things. Some of it's going to be sort of very theoretical and global, and other aspects of it are going to be very sort of specific kinds of tips and tricks kinds of things. But we're going to talk a little bit about what data management and data quality is within Salesforce. We're going to think about what the challenge of data is and why we need to think about it as a challenge. We're going to talk a little bit about how you build out operationally from data, so a data-centric approach to managing your business and operations. And then we're going to try to give you some specific use cases and some implementation tips based on, particularly on Kevin's own experience with his own client base, but we also certainly have some from the Cloudingo standpoint as well, and I'm happy to share those with you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And I'd like to add that while we promoted this webinar for marketing and sales ops and admins, data is a topic for everyone. It affects everybody. So we'll also be talking about, for those of you out there who executives or in management, why the weeds may not matter, but the implications and the outcomes absolutely matter at every level of the business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I want us to think about that in a world of big data. You're only really as good as your data. I mean, think about how important data is in your operations. Every organization who's on this call today, data is probably the key thing. Sometimes in some regards, it's more important than human resources. And we all know how paralyzed we are if a system goes down. Certainly Salesforce has had some big outages, and those are legendary because it shuts everything down. So what we want to think about is data as a strategic corporate asset, but we also want to think about data management as a strategic corporate discipline. And we can look at that as from a perspective of both being reactive and proactive. So reactive is when you're addressing existing problems and challenges, but proactive is where you're anticipating how to make your data and your systems work better for you, whose responsibilities those are, what the expectations are, and how they can be supportive of your business operations. So with that, let's get down to sort of data quality 101. So Kevin, I know that you deal with a lot of clients, and one of the first things you need to do is talk to them about data quality. So how do you open that conversation, and how do you explain to them what data quality is and what they need to be thinking about?
Absolutely. So first of all, we deal primarily with sub-enterprise companies, young, growing companies with aspirations to use Salesforce and related technologies to become big companies. And often we're the first ones bringing up the data quality discussion. And there are common definitions, so let's just level set of what they are. Number one, uniqueness. Now, for all of you who are already familiar with Cloudingo, uniqueness, lack of duplicates. Acme Corp has one record. That's uniqueness, lack of duplicates. Usually, most commonly, we look at accounts, contacts, and leads to contacts. Accuracy. First of all, I want to make sure that there's only one Joseph Smith record at Acme Company, if there really is only one Joseph Smith. And then accuracy is making sure that his phone number and his email are correct, they're accurate, that the mailing address, if I'm sending out, if I need to ship, if I'm sending out, if I need the mailing address, that it's accurate. Completeness. Completeness would be that in Joe Smith, that if title is important for my business, that I have a title entered for him, and that I have in my CRM all of the records that I would expect to have, that I have all of my prospects, I have all my leads, I have all. So completeness is both on a per record basis, and then that the records themselves exist in the database. Those are the main ones, but some others that don't get thought of as much, where we spend a lot of time consulting and uncovering bigger issues, usage. So for all the reps out there, stop me if you've heard this before. To get an opportunity move from stage to stage, you have to navigate through a 50, 75 field form, and you fill in 2 fields. And so now all of a sudden we have a usage issue. Why are we collecting data, and are we actually using it? So those two go in hand. And then the other two sort of come along for the ride. Validity, is the phone number allowed to be called? Is it not on a do not call list, let's say? Is postal, let's say in the US, is mailing address adhere to US postal standards? And age, is how old, recent is this data? So uniqueness, accuracy, completeness are the main ones. Also usage, validity, and age.
Yeah, it's interesting that and we're going to talk a little bit about the cost of bad data, but one of the things I always find really interesting about that list of data quality matters is the issue of age. And this is a little bit of an aside, so I apologize for taking that conversation in a different direction, but in my own experience, the age of data is often ignored, that data becomes a kind of security blanket, and clients and Salesforce users never want to delete anything, even though you can show them that the values they're holding are bad, the ways that they're operationally working with their data, either through emails or phone numbers, aren't there in the data, that the data is 5 years old and it has no activity, and yet there's a reluctance to sort of clean that data out and keep their data set fresh. So anyway, I apologize for taking that down in a different pathway, but those of you out there in the audience, think about the age of your data and maybe run some analysis and some reports and look at how old and how long you've held on to some of those records in your Salesforce instances. All right, so Kevin, we've got accuracy, we've got completeness, we've got uniqueness, we've got all these things that count as elements of data quality. But what is the cost of those not being followed in terms of your data practice? I mean, why is bad data problematic?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, you can't make an informed decision if you don't trust the data. You can't, if your windshield is greasy and grimy, you can't see where you're going. And if your rear view mirror is greasy and grimy or pointed in the wrong direction, you can't see where you've been. You can't accurately measure the health and trajectory of your business. That's from the manager and executive point of view. Let's talk about users, as in your sales and your service reps and your customers. When data is bad, there is a huge vulnerability to dissatisfaction. Reps don't trust the data, therefore they don't use the system. If customers don't see that data that they've given you, and this can be over the phone call, the customer saying, I like red, and they're getting emails about things in blue. It's a disconnect. They expect a unified experience, and data is the connector. So a loss of satisfaction amongst customers and employees, which obviously can have an enormous revenue and expense hit. And then similarly, again, lost in trust means low adoption of the systems. Salesforce and these related products are a tremendous investment, and probably the number one reason why executives come to us and hire us is we're spending a lot of money and it's not being used, and therefore I don't have the information I need to lead the company. All of that comes from the cost of bad data. And then I'll throw in a bonus one. Some of you in the large organizations will realize there actually are storage limits within Salesforce. So if you're just storing everything without an actual strategy, well, the cost that Salesforce charges for additional data is hefty. So that's a very hard cost as well.
Indeed. So yeah, we've got increased costs, we've got decreased revenue, we've got disruptions of daily operations, bad technical business decisions, or undermining strategic corporate decisions. So all of those things have their roots in bad data. So all right, so we know that. We know what data quality is. We know what the cost is. It's significant in a lot of different ways, both hard and soft costs. What causes poor data? I mean, I know we all have some ideas, but there's a lot of things we may not even realize in terms of the cause of bad data.
And my experience is showing that the primary cause is more cultural and people-oriented, more so than technology. Technology matters, and I'll mention that shortly. But the first, lack of governance and ownership. And for anybody whose eyes just rolled about a consultant referring to governance, really all I mean is coordination and a framework for decision making. And good governance is proportional to the size and needs of your company. So an example of lack of governance is everybody's an admin, and therefore I'll just add a checkbox to get something done that I need. And now all of a sudden, pretty quickly you have a Frankenstein solution. That's an example of a lack of governance. A lack of governance would be sales team thinks of leads one way, marketing team thinks of leads a different way, and therefore metrics and the way they collect fundamentally out of alignment. Governance and ownership means alignment and coordination. Also with that can be other details like CRUD, who has field level security, that sort of stuff. Next category, integrations. Integrations is a huge cause of data quality decline. And this can be because the mappings or the triggers or just overall the settings aren't, there's just things off. Often the way that we see that is leads coming in with company unknown, contacts being created without accounts, certain things that basically you can't do with the through the UI, but API users, API access can create some pretty poor data issues. That's also where lots of duplicates end up coming. So integrations without proper planning or configuration or management. And then the last two on my list, poor user experience. This one often gets overlooked. So back to my example of I'm a rep, I'm paid on quota, it's the end of the month, I need to move some ops forwarders to closure, and yet I'm faced with a form with 75 fields. I need to get the deal done. What do you think the chances of me filling out 75 fields are? So we'll talk about ways to rectify, but just an overall poor user experience. It's not just what the data entry looks like, but think about, why am I entering this data if in the end all it's being used for is for my manager to hassle me during a one-on-one? All that's part of a poor user experience. And then finally, told you I'd get there, lack of tools. Salesforce actually has quite crummy data management. It's crummy or non-existent. The amount of times when it missed an exact match, and Cloudingo caught it, or a fuzzy match, Cloudingo caught it. So if you want a tool to measure uniqueness, if you want to enrich your data, make sure that you have the accurate phone numbers. Have an easy way to see how much is this, what percent of records does this field have a value for. All these things are best used with third-party tools. And I can't speak for Salesforce, but it sure seems like that's a deliberate partner out strategy to just let others carry the technical, flag of maintaining data quality.
Well, and as a Salesforce partner, we're certainly happy that there's a space for us. So what I'm hearing when we talk about the causes of poor data, I think if there's anything that sort of holds this together, like the umbrella over all of these causes of poor data, is not actually having a strategy around managing your data. And so that's one of the things we're going to talk about. And I know that that can be challenging because I know a lot of people out there in our audience today, and this is how I started too, we didn't have a dedicated Salesforce administrator. Salesforce makes it so easy to get started that managing the Salesforce instance was just, assigned to somebody who seemed to have a little bit of understanding about how to work with it, even though they had a fully other kind of role within the organization. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't at least spend a small amount of time thinking about how to maintain your data, how to protect it, how it's working for you, how it's not working for you. And I think that's what we want to try to get at. So all of these causes of poor data come down to not having a strategy or an approach to maintaining that asset for you.
So, and to add to that, Stephen, what we often find, because a lot of times Salesforce will get sort of relegated, again, in my startup client base, that Salesforce is a detail to track deals. And ultimately, what it is, it's a system of record and potentially a system of truth of getting closer with your customers and having a clear vision of how your core business processes work. How does something get from step A to step E, and who's involved? Is the more you have that thought through, the more you will get out of this system, and data is a huge part of that. What data goes in, data goes out.
Yeah, so we've defined data quality, we've talked about the cost, we've talked about the causes. What's the benefit of increasing your data quality by even 10%, 20%, 40%? What's the benefit of high quality data?
Well, the easy answer is it's the opposite result, opposite outcome of all the costs of bad data. So now all of a sudden you have trustworthy data, better decision making. So the first step is you'll have a great rear view mirror. You will accurately see the health of your business. And then moving to the plus and opening opportunities. I mean, it's amazing. We've gone, 10 plus minutes and we haven't mentioned AI yet. So let me break the ice. AI is only as good as the data upon which it is grounded. So AI, a lot of times people forget AI first, or in the last few years, had meant predictive. What's the next best action I should take? What's my predicted forecast for this quarter? Not to mention now generative. If we want to have created emails, case summaries, order status, things like this that AI will generate for us. Well, if you've heard the term hallucination, that often comes from a lack of data or inaccurate data. So if we want well-grounded, credible, trustworthy AI outputs, the main input is quality data.
Yeah, it's so interesting you brought up AI because obviously Salesforce is entering the AI space. There's tools and add-ons and features of Salesforce now that utilize AI. We're looking at it in Cloudingo too. It's everywhere, and I think that's a really simple, straightforward, direct way to understand why data quality is important. But it also, I mean, it comes down to things like making your projections and analyzing your own business operations. And if the underlying data is no good, your projections for this year, for next year, next quarter, whatever it might be, aren't entirely reliable. And if you're taking action on those kinds of reportings and those ways of analyzing what you have, you might not be making the best choices in your business decisions. And that can be a huge problem in the end. Yeah. All right, so let's start getting into the details a little bit more and think about what it means to have a data-centric approach, what it means to have a data as a strategic corporate discipline. So we'll start with governance. So Kevin, tell me what you mean by governance, what you think about when you think about governance, and how you work with your clients around governance.
So governance, again, is the collaboration and alignment and a decision framework of how data is collected, stored, used throughout the org. That, again, that could sound bureaucratic and wordy, but let me give some very tangible examples where companies get tripped up. Do I use leads? I do account-based sales and marketing. Do I use Salesforce leads? Do I use the lead object? If so, what makes a lead? What do I want to store as a lead? When would a lead, let's say, get converted to a contact? Let's take that a step further. Lead source, the lead source field. If you ask a marketer what lead source means, you'll frequently get an answer. Well, a typical lead source would be, I sourced this lead from Cognizant, from ZoomInfo, from a trade show. They came through the website. You ask a salesperson the lead source, you're more likely to get an answer of, this was outbound prospecting, this was an inbound lead, this was a result of my personal network, or my social selling skills. They think of it fundamentally different. Marketing thinks of it as, how did it get into my database? Sales will think of it as, how did it really enter my sphere, my consciousness, and start my sales process. So that's just a specific. And governance also is, well, who really is going to be a sysadmin? Or there's a change that needs to be made to Salesforce. Do we just accept everybody's? Do we implement every change, or is there some type of selection? All that falls under governance. So, and then for large enterprise companies, yes, governance can be more of a center of excellence. You have IT represented, and you have a lot more stakeholders. Ultimately, governance gets to the point that you were making, Stephen, of make sure that you're thinking through what the business needs are and what overall business outcomes, and governance helps translate that into what happens in Salesforce and connected systems.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that you brought up an example of the lead source field or lead status field and how marketing looks at it differently from sales. And one of the things that I always recommend when I'm encouraging people to think about a strategy about data management is to start at the end. So who are the users of your data? Who are your data consumers? And how does your data model serve them? And it's probably not the same for each of those categories. Marketing is going to have a particular use case and a particular need, and sales is going to have a particular use case and a particular need, and your C-suite or your executives are going to have a particular use case and need. Same with service and support, all of those different things. So, and I think when you're working with those people, they tend to, and you're asking them about Salesforce, they tend to describe how they want the system to work rather than what their objectives and goals are. So as you're working with those things, and I do encourage you to sit with your teams. If you are managing your Salesforce instance, sit with your teams, watch what they do on a daily basis, watch how they're using the data and how they're engaging with Salesforce, because you're the experts on Salesforce. And if you see what they're doing and you see what they need, you can better understand how to make those processes more effective and more efficient, and how to build out your Salesforce instance. It might be different dashboards, it might be different page views and page layouts. All of those are so easy to create in Salesforce and can make each of your business divisions that much more effective when in how they engage with and use the data that they have available to them.
Absolutely. So I think that leads really well to processes. So ultimately, business is a set of processes. I'm biased. I have engineering degrees. I am system oriented. Life and Salesforce is a series of processes. And so here are the main ones that we help customers think through. And again, all of them have data implications. How do we take a visitor into an anonymous visitor to a lead? How do we go from a lead to an opportunity? How do we work those opportunities to close? Once they're closed, how do we deliver and fulfill our product or service? And then from delivery to repeat business, upsell, renewal, and just ongoing, in keeping the wheel going. Those are major buckets, but within them, there's a series of processes. And again, with all the data requirements, which also fits into automation. So let me give another example. Going back to our lead and whether we use leads, we don't use leads, we're account-based. So let's say we do use leads, but there are certain criteria by which a lead qualifies. So now we have a definition, or we created a definition of what qualify or what conditions needs to be met for the lead to be converted. And so that's a process and a governance issue. And then an automation issue is, well, what if we have hundreds? What if we have thousands of these? Are we asking our reps to manually convert each one? There's automation that can do that. And then again, integration. Well, a lot of these leads are coming from our marketing automation platform. They may be coming from our integration into GoToMeeting or our Zoom webinar. There are plenty of ways, our mobile app signups. So all of these play together, and it all. The next major step is defining your core business processes. Who's involved? What data comes in? What data goes out?
Yeah, I think it's so important to understand what the key drivers and data points are that actually drive and run your business. Salesforce data management is so much more than just the day-to-day, adding a field here, onboarding a new user, running some sort of report. What I think is so essential is really understanding what elements of the data are actually used to drive the business, and then figuring out ways in which those are high quality, that they're complete, that the reports and dashboards are built out that surface the information so that it can be properly used. And again, that comes down to a strategy, thinking about what needs to be monitored and for whom, which users, which teams need to have that information surfaced for them. And so those of you out there running your Salesforce instances, again, that's the ask is that you actually work with those teams and identify what their needs are so that you can make the asset of data more effective to them. So given that, Kevin, let's talk a little bit about automation. Like, how do we make this happen in a sort of seamless, automated way?
Yeah, so one example, let's say, can be leads automatically being converted. For those of you with the eagle eyes out there, you may notice that the image under automation involves Salesforce Data Cloud. So data is so important to Salesforce, it gets its own cloud. There's no Flow Cloud, there's no Apex Cloud, but there's a Data Cloud. So we just want to do a brief call out to why it's under automation, why we're even showing this image. Automation can happen. We're all used to it happening from data that lives within Salesforce or gets pushed into Salesforce. So a common automation, some of the most baseline automations that we use all the time. Opportunity naming conventions. No matter what the rep puts in, we're going to get the same opportunity name all the time. Opportunity goes to closed won for the first time for a customer. That customer type now all of a sudden moves from prospect to customer. I mean, I think you all have plenty of examples of automations that just update data because it's being derived, and we're not asking the user to update data, because guess what? They won't. If they outright don't have to, and if you're thinking I'm just going to make it required or do a validation rule, well, it goes back to the user experience. If they're getting error after error, I encourage you to think through and empathize from their point of view. Are you asking for data entry when it could be automated or derived or calculated? But the reason why we have Data Cloud up there is the automation doesn't have to just come from data that sits within Salesforce. This data that can trigger an automation can be an item is back in stock from your inventory system. An invoice has now gone overdue from your finance system. A customer has been looking at the upgrade button, has been looking at upgrade plans within your app. All these can trigger automations such as dropping that user into a cadence or a sequence, triggering a follow-up item from the rep, sales or service. So automations now don't have to just be from data that sits within Salesforce, but outside as well. Now, again, these things were possible before using MuleSoft or other connectors, but what I'm most excited about with Data Cloud is it democratizes this and makes it much easier at the admin level of skills to implement and manage. And I get excited about things that used to only be available for enterprises that now can become available for the sub-enterprise, the marketplace that we serve. Data Cloud is a very exciting proposition.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about skills too, and how easy Data Cloud makes it to use some of these higher level functions. As I've said before, Salesforce is easy to get started on. And Salesforce is also incredibly complex and complicated. But even the most average administrator of Salesforce can implement some of these strategies in a fairly quick and easy and seamless way. Data Cloud is one way that makes it happen. And Kevin, thank you for those examples. I want to give an example from my own experience because I think it illustrates a lot of what we're talking about here, about building a strategy and sitting with your users to understand what they're doing with the data, and then figuring out a way to simplify, make that more efficient, more effective. In our own usage, so Cloudingo is a subscription model, and it has an annual license. And so when our salespeople sell a new license for Cloudingo, a new subscription, we use the opportunity object in Salesforce. They close that opportunity when the deal closes, and then there's a manual process to track that license over its annual subscription. And the salespeople were having to create a renewal opportunity for a year from the close date. And there was lots of data elements that they were copying over from the previous opportunity. And as soon as we saw that, and as soon as those of us on the admin side saw what they were doing on a daily basis with every opportunity, we realized that we could automate that process. And the trigger is setting that opportunity to closed won, and that auto generates a renewal opportunity for a year later and sets the tasks for all of the salespeople to follow up on the right intervals. And that was in some ways, I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but in some ways a life-changing experience for the sales guys and for their day-to-day process. And so it's those kinds of things, that sitting with your users and seeing how they're working, those examples that Kevin gave us, and thinking about, okay, what can I do in the instance to make this easier, to make this speedier, to make it less error prone and less manual? And that's where the automation comes in. So absolutely explore those opportunities.
And I'd remind everyone, not just moving a prospect to a customer, but the automation. Unfortunately, churn, customers don't stay customers forever. Churn, term expiration, whatever. Is there an automation in place to now move that type to a former customer, or however you want to designate. Because again, we see time, we ask, how many customers do you have? They run a report, like, oh, no longer, no, and the inaccuracies, again, the data is old, it is inaccurate.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you talked about running reports. I think that there's so many different ways that we can use reports. And instead of just building a static report, you might consider building things like exception reports. Exception reports would be things that fall out of an acceptable range, and that they require some sort of action. Those are hugely effective ways of managing and using the data that's in your Salesforce. So, for example, build me a list of reports for opportunities that are 180 days past close. Right? And then your sales manager takes that to the sales team and kind of looks at what's going on. So instead of just getting a static list of your opportunities to date, figure out ways of exceptions that actually require some sort of action to be taken on your part. So I think those are other sort of valuable ways about thinking about managing your data. So Kevin, let's talk about integrations. I mean, that's got its own category here, and we've already addressed it in the previous segment of our conversation.
Yeah, so integrations, again, some of the more common ones in smaller and growing companies are integrating their marketing automation platform. Pardot, now known as Account Engagement, is on a different platform, so it really is an integration, or Marketo or HubSpot or Eloqua, sales engagement platforms, your document management, your PandaDoc, your DocuSign. There's a common list, and those integrations are generally run by AppExchange managed packages, and they're relatively straightforward. Again, it's not a technical challenge, but I urge you to make sure that you're clear on triggers and mappings, because even though there aren't that many drop downs and buttons to click, we see when it goes wrong. And again, part of knowing how to configure it correctly is being clear and understanding how your users use the different systems, which comes back to the concept of a system of record and a system of truth. So for a lot of companies, they like their BDRs working in outreach. That is their system of record. Yet Salesforce will be the system of truth, because that contact record will get updated by outreach, it will get updated by Marketo, it'll get updated through the order management system, and Salesforce is the center of all that. Salesforce, the system of truth, outreach, the system of record. So the point being, integration is all about, and I'll give a slightly technical example in the next section of this talk. But integration can span from incredibly complex to not technically complex, but again, down to the business mapping and the understanding of the overall landscape. But integration has a huge effect on data quality.
Yeah, and I think this sort of gets at the heart of what Salesforce is doing when it's talking about the customer 360 view. So it's this idea that we're trying to get away from silos of data that might be in different systems, and then therefore is also repeated across different systems, so that if we can integrate, and sometimes this takes a data architect to work with you. And so I know not a lot of the smaller organizations on our call don't have those resources available to you, but for large organizations, a data architect can figure out ways in which the systems can integrate so that you don't have repeated data. Each system is responsible for a segment of the data, but it's still all connected to one another so that it can be accessed in various ways.
Yeah, and what we're excited about in the integration and the automation and data cloud conversation is we work with a lot of SaaS companies. And those SaaS companies, as long as they expose their platform through endpoints and APIs, it is now easier than ever before using a data cloud. Again, there are multiple methods, but data cloud now makes it very easy to connect their first-party data and automate off it. So again, what would typically take a lot of coordination between IT, the product team, marketing, from a technical point of view, can now be a lot simplified, and now the coordination is around business rules, logic, governance, things of that nature. And again, the overall thread of Salesforce capabilities is they're making more and more power available to low and no code. And don't get me, we love code, but code comes with complexity of maintenance, complexity of and cost to build, and a certain level of brittleness, meaning if changes need to be made, developers need to make the change, and that typically slows down the agility of the business.
Yes, absolutely. So I think, Kevin, you've put together some screenshots and some real examples for us to share, right? So maybe I think this would be a good time to begin jumping into some of those, and we can look at some specifics that I think will illustrate the points that we've been talking about, and that there are some takeaways that those of you in our audience can begin to think about implementing in your own Salesforce practices.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, let's talk about account hierarchy. This is a simple field. Its parent account is an out-of-the-box standard field on account. Yet it comes simple concept, complex to implement. So in the industry, particularly where we've seen this, education. So I have here a screenshot, University of California. Well, there are 14 or 15 campuses. We want to have a nested relationship to show that they're all part of the University of California system. QSR, quick service restaurants. Think Yum Brands owns Taco Bell, a regional franchisor down to your local Taco Bell versus Kentucky Fried Chicken. There's a nested account relationship. Automotive dealerships. Nello Motors in Roseville, California has Porsche, has Audi, has Nissan. I forget what but again, a roll-up relationship. But so let's say, how do you keep this up to date without relying, because there aren't always databases. You can't always rely on a Zoom Info or Cognism to have this accurate for you. So sometimes you just need to have your users participate in this. Well, if I have University of California with 14 campuses, the out-of-the-box way would just be going one by one, edit, parent account. Well, this is just a simple screen flow. At the parent, you can now assign multiple children. And the point here isn't that this is so technically sophisticated, but it's a whole point. Make the user, the easier you make it for your users, the better data you will get. And as long as there's a motivation, well, why should they care about parent-child relationship? Well, account ownership often goes with territories and goes with accounts and or opportunities, and ultimately that finds its way to commissions. Sales reps will be motivated to have the proper account ownership and make it easy for them to update it when needed.
And I want to emphasize what Kevin said there. He said it's a simple screen flow to establish account parent relationships, hierarchies within your records. And I bring that up because I get that question almost on a weekly basis about how do I either protect my hierarchical relationships when I'm doing all the stuff that Cloudingo does, or how do I establish it? And I don't always have an answer because we don't build that out. But I mean, Kevin's given you some tips on how to make that happen for you. So hopefully that resonates with some of you out there. All right. Do you want to move on to the next one, Kevin? Or?
Yeah. All right. So another very common cause of data inaccuracy is contacts move to other companies. This happens in all industries. I'd like to, I don't know, maybe my bias, confirmation bias, just tech seems particularly prone to people moving. So what's showing here, again, same spirit, easy to use screen flow. Rep finds out that Stephen is planning on leaving, could enter in the information about the new account, and then the result on the next screen. So what we're doing here is, now it would be very easy to just go to Stephen's record and update the account name. But the drawback to that is we would lose all of Stephen's history. We would lose all of the activity capture, the events, the emails, opportunities, cases, all that. All that would incorrectly travel with Stephen to his new company. And that's just an inaccurate view of the real world. So just this flow makes it easy for the rep to update And again, you could also update, of course, through your ZoomInfo, your Cognism, your Sales Navigator refreshes. But a lot of times, your rep is going to be the first one to know before those data sources. So it gives a chance to move them to the new company and archives the old company, the old contact. So available for reporting, trend analysis, all that, but again, keeps it clean. And we happen to just append the company, because then our matching and duplicate rules stay true.
Yeah, and just to restate what Kevin said, he's talking about maximizing workflow efficiency. Obviously, you can just hope, cross your fingers, that when a marketing or a sales rep is talking to a contact that you have in your Salesforce instance, and they realize that they're no longer at the company they thought they were, that they're going to create a new record. But that's cumbersome, it takes time, and usually doesn't happen. But with sort of maximizing your workflow efficiency, all of this it's a much lighter burden on your users, and it's much more likely that it's actually going to happen. And I also do want to remind you too that there are some services out there that will track employee attrition and find out where employees move to, and you can sort of automatically update. Those are services, paid add-ons for Salesforce, so you can explore that as well if you feel like tracking your contacts through their professional histories is somewhat problematic or challenging for you. But
yeah, and we also connect this to our marketing automation, so when we get a hard bounce, it'll trigger a left company.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go to the next one.
All right, little bit of technical sophistication here. No code, call out, and transform. What this means is that sometimes we need data that lives outside of Salesforce to be part of a Salesforce process. Data Cloud is a hammer. Sometimes we need a scalpel or something more fine-tuned. So common examples, let's say exchange rates. We use multi-currency, and there is no native exchange rate functionality within Salesforce. Holidays, let's say, again, we work in multiple geographies and we don't want to send marketing or sales emails out on a holiday. We want to know what VIP tier this customer is, and that can change based on buying behavior. Credit inventory checks are just some common examples of how we need something from a system that lives outside of Salesforce. That could be a system that we own, or it could be a system that's more public. And so again, this has been possible for quite a while, requiring code and developers. Now this functionality is coming so much more easier to the admin level. And I think of some implementations where, again, we had to spend a lot of development hours, where now using the flow call out element and the transform data element makes these things, orders of magnitude less costly in time and resources. So again, data in Salesforce doesn't always mean that the data originates in Salesforce. This is back to the whole system of record, system of truth, source of truth.
Yeah,
so I like these examples because these are in the most recent releases.
Yeah, and it comes down again to efficiency and effectiveness. All right. I think you have one more, I think, right?
One more, I'll make it brief. It's another mention about Data Cloud, which we have been weaving into the conversation. And I'm mentioning it because this is still, I consider it and talk to my clients, it's still in the early days for the market segment that we serve, but the possibility is very exciting. And the prereq still comes down to the same thing. The more you have your data house in order, the more you will be able to take advantage of this. And the last is a screenshot. And for all of you who are either attending Trailblazer DX or make sure you've got your notifications turned on, it's in another few weeks. And we know we're going to hear some very exciting rollouts and GA announcements of this. Last screenshot is from Prompt Builder. So this is really just behind the scenes of how we can set up the framework for generating sales emails based off of data that lives not only within Salesforce, but data that lives in any of your connected systems. And again, unlike, let's say, the call out and transform example, this data doesn't need to be pushed and stored in Salesforce. It can stay wherever it is. So now think about all of your customer touch points, webinars, website, mobile app, desktop app, customer chat bots, whatever, all of these things. This is where now all of a sudden those can be taken into account when we write the next sales email, the next service email, the next whatever email. And there are other capabilities as well. And these are the things that I'm very excited about, because it opens up all new capabilities. And see if you could guess, it all comes down to solid data and a data strategy.
Yeah, it is very exciting indeed. So we're getting close to the end of the session, but I want to run through just a couple of kind of tips and tricks to sort of takeaways that might be lower lift to implement. And Kevin, just jump in here if you have some thoughts as I just go through the list. But one of the things that I think can be really effective in managing data in Salesforce is, instead of using, again, I mentioned static reports, but build color-coded dashboards. If you don't know anything about dashboards and you've never worked with the dashboards, go out and do the trailhead in an hour and learn how to use dashboards, because they are amazing. You can see a few examples right there on the screen. And build dashboards for whatever the meaningful things are that your stakeholders need to know. So for example, if you've got opportunities that are marked as supposed to close, but they are showing no activity, build a dashboard that's color-coded for your sales guys. If you've got opportunities that are 180 days old but still haven't closed, build a dashboard for that. And then run your meetings from Salesforce using these dashboards, because that is a reminder to your teams of how important the data is and how important it is to maintain that data, keep it complete, keep it up to date. Because if you've got reps sitting in a meeting with their sales manager and the opportunity report that the sales manager is showing isn't accurate because they haven't done what they were supposed to do with the data, hey, it's a built-in way of prodding them along to do the jobs that they're supposed to be doing. Some other quick things to do: standardize your data. I mean, think about naming conventions, using standard prefixes and suffixes, using state and country pick lists in Salesforce. It's already built in, easy to implement, using standardized formats for phone numbers. And once you set up these standards, make sure that you go back and historically update your data that may be out of the standard so that everything is in alignment. Think about data cleansing, verify addresses, verify email addresses, verify phone numbers. All of those are third-party services that you can access to make sure that the data is accurate, deliverable, those sorts of things. More Cloudingo, think about deduping your data. It's what we do all day long. And then we also briefly talked about enhancing and augmenting your data. I know that Kevin brought that up. And I'm sure that, Kevin, that's one of the things that you have to work with your clients on quite a bit too. So just wanted to give you just a few tidbits of things that you could start working on today to put together a strategy for managing your data and coming up with a plan for how it fits into your Salesforce practice and your operational needs at your organizations. Right? So the last thing I wanted to do, so first of all, I want to thank Kevin for participating in this conversation today. I think it's been very interesting and enlightening for me, and I hope our audience has enjoyed it. But Kevin, tell us just a little bit about your services and what you are thinking about doing for the folks who have been participating in our webinar today.
Yeah, so if any of you feel like you need some assistance in getting started, we've put together a package that goes through all the steps that we've discussed using the third-party technology from Cloudingo and partners such as Elements Cloud and Cognism to get all of those data dimensions measured, and working with you to get your data readiness and strategy in line with your business goals and objectives. And so we're excited to answer questions, just go into any of these topics that we broached in more depth. And again, what motivates me and my colleagues is seeing the delight that comes from just the relief of pressure and worry of, oh my gosh, my job has gotten a lot easier, and getting data cleaned up and clean going forward and informing the rest of the business is a huge part of that. So I hope to see you, as they say, out on the trail, or here's my contact information. And again, thank you, Stephen and Olivia and Cloudingo, for inviting me and allowing me to participate in such an enjoyable discussion.
And so I want to reiterate too that we are here to answer any questions you might have. Feel free to send them over to us at any point. If you are interested in data quality assessment, Cloudingo has a free trial, of course. But I also want to say that Kevin is a partner of Cloudingo and AcousticSelling is a partner of Cloudingo. So we highly recommend Kevin as a professional and recommend his services. So I encourage you, if you need some assistance, to reach out to Kevin and see what you can do together to work things out. All right. Well, with that said, I want to thank everybody for signing on to the webinar today. We hope this was informative and useful to you. We will be sending out a recording. We'll also include this slide deck. So if you missed Kevin's contact information, that's going to be available to you in a follow-up. So just look for that. And look for us on a future webinar, probably in the next few months. We'll do another one. And thank you again. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.